Okay, it's ready to start now.
Hello, Mari.
Hello. Hello, everybody. My name is Marie Frederick Twing. I am the treasurer of Africa TESOL. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this second webinar on one of Africa TESOL Decentring ELT webinar series. I will be co-moderating this session with Ari Kuchakucha, Africa TESOL Advisor, Board Member, and the initiator of this webinar series. Hello, Harry.
Hello, Mari. Good to be here with you this week.
Okay, thank you very much. So this, as I said a while ago, this is the second webinar. And in our first webinar, we reflected on teacher associations, agency, and thought leadership. Richard gave us a definition of decentering ELT as a scheme or proposal developed by the Hornby Trust to support teachers for them to be more effective generators of local professional and pedagogic knowledge about the English language education. The webinar also reflected on the need for teachers to be skeptical about external theories and be able to identify their own expertise, value local expertise, and promote sharing. So each of the different panelists also gave us an illustration of how, through their different projects, they succeeded in shifting the center of the development of ideas about language, education, and professional development to their local teacher associations and how their associations are providing space for teachers in building knowledge and decentering the hegemony of top-down policy processes in different ways. So the keywords I took away with me from that first webinar were local expertise, sharing of best practices, and communities of practice. Again, talking about communities of practice. In this second webinar of our Decentering ELT webinar series, we are going to be discussing the role of teacher associations in decentering ELT. And we are delighted to welcome Amol Padward, a member of the Hornby Decentering team, and also a member of INET India. Frederick Ojambo from Beta Sia ELT Group Kenya, Paula Horebo Jello from Rizal, Chile, and Sagun Serestra from Delta, Nepal. But before moving further, we would like to ask Amol to help us better clarify the concept of decentering. So, Amol, my first question to you is, what is the center that we are trying to decenter? And what are the possible different layers or levels of decentering?
Hi, Mari.
Amol?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Mari, for the introduction, and thank you, Africa TESOL, for this opportunity to be with you today. The simple answer to your question, what center we are trying to decenter, would be primarily the Anglophone regions like the USA and some European countries and Australia. But that would be a very simplified answer. The situation is slightly more complex. The Whenever a group or an ideology or an agency tries to claim that they have the most valid or the best knowledge, uh, I can hear some echo somewhere. Is it okay?
Carry on.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Thank you, thank you. So the center we essentially talk about is not just the Anglophone countries, or they are primarily the countries, because we live with an assumption that the best textbooks, the best methodological approaches, the best ELT practices are born in the West, and they are ideal for the whole world, and everywhere they should be applied. Or we also proceed with the assumption that the analysis and understanding developed in the West about the world ELT is valid and it is applicable everywhere. To give a simple example, we routinely talk about the chronology of different methods that evolved through the history of ELT, and then we begin with grammar translation, go on to direct method, situational, communicative language teaching, etc. And that is one trajectory which is defined and designed in the West. And the whole world believes that everywhere in each country, we had the same kind of history, which is not true. But coming to the second part of what you said about the different layers or levels of centering and decentering, it is true, as Johann Galtung says, that there are peripheries in the center and there are centers in the periphery. So that's why I began by saying that it's not just Anglophone regions, primarily USA, UK, and Australia, but there are also similar tendencies in other parts of the world. So when we talk of the center, we are essentially talking of the tendency to uh, manifest or to assert hegemony, dominance of ideas, of practices, of suggestions, of materials, of methods on rest of the world or on other groups, claiming that this particular group has the most valid or the most applicable or the best knowledge. That is the broad abstract notion of centering. And decentering is a countering tendency. So fighting against this, trying to go away from this kind of hegemony, trying to challenge and dismantle this dominance, I will call decentering. So I hope I was able to answer your question, Mari. You are mute, Mari.
Yeah, thank you, Amol. Thank you very much for this definition. And I have a second question. Why are you interested in the notion of decentering ELT, and how, from your own experience, do you see it working in practice, sorry?
Well, I'm interested in decentering for political reasons, social reasons, cultural reasons, economic reasons, because in all those aspects, I see some really damaging, harmful effects of the hegemony of the center. In India, as probably in many other parts of the world, English has a prestige value. English is the language of aspirations. And using that status, there are center-based publication houses, textbook production houses, ELT experts who come and make money. But on the top of that, they also come and tell us that they have the solutions to our problems. They have better solutions than us. They know our problems better. And what they prescribe is the only solution available. So on the one hand, they claim that they have the knowledge. And on the other hand, they give us a sense that we are not capable of addressing problems ourselves. So that kind of additional feature of this tendency troubles me a lot. In India, we already face a lot of social divide, cultural divide. We have people who we routinely divide as English haves and English have-nots, and that's a massive dividing line. So if you have good English, you have got lots of opportunities and doors open. If you don't, then you suffer a lot. So this situation is further complicated by the center-sponsored or center-based practices. And that's the reason why I'm personally interested in countering these tendencies in and joining forces with the decentering oriented people. There is also a personal and professional reason. As a person, I believe that if I'm a responsible citizen, then it's my duty to fight for a just and equal society. And if I'm a professional, then there is a professional commitment I must show that in my profession, I would always follow ethical and fair practices. You asked also about what kind of examples I see in my own practice. And I will mention two. One is the teacher research initiative that INET runs, where teachers voluntarily come together to explore their own classrooms, their own concerns, and try to find solutions to their own problems through systematic inquiry. But the important aspect of this whole initiative is that it's purely voluntary. Nobody pays money to anyone. We are not funded, and the teachers themselves spend from their own pockets when we come together for workshops, trainings, etc. It's not only our own capacity building, but it's also giving ourselves a sense that we can understand and address our own problems. The second example I would quote is from the state of Maharashtra, where I belong, where, and it's a very interesting story because the government and the Minister of Education were involved in that. In this case, the Education Ministry changed its conventional orientation of always involving experts, whether it's textbook designing or training programs or being master trainers or developing projects. Everywhere it would be a small coterie of experts who would always be doing all kinds of jobs. But in the last 6-7 years, there had been a radical change in the orientation and a huge force and network of, I'm using that word in quotations, ordinary teachers was built. And teachers came together and joined this force to design textbooks, to reform curriculum, to produce training materials, or even becoming master trainers themselves and mentors themselves, and also, of course, joining research. So this is a massive capacity building exercise which has created a huge force in the state of Maharashtra. So I believe that these are two very concrete examples of decentering.
Okay, thank you, Amol. And so far, my understanding of decentering involves breaking away from the hegemony of externally generated ideas about language education. But in some teacher associations, the leaders are generally the center, and the other members often feel marginalized. For example, in cultures where women are not always given the space to showcase their abilities, they are suffering from the consequences of that double hegemony. So what mechanisms do you think can be put in place to enable women to contribute to decentering?
I have two things to say in response to your question. One is when we talk of centering, let us not carry a wrong impression that center by definition is bad and must be thrown away, because complete removal of center is anarchy. So it's not the center, but the centering tendency, the hegemony that we are against. When you say that there are in teacher associations, some leaders are the center, I would go on and say that not some. Every leader in any association is in the center, and that person is temporarily in the center. and there is no option to that. That person has to be in center because leadership is the center of that association. The question is how that center operates. Does it operate as a hegemonic exercise or does it operate in a democratic way? Because you can't have an association without any steering, a group of people steering it. That group of people may keep on changing, but that some kind of building constructive design is required. Now, if we wish to see that leadership, that center as a democratic, participatory, and fair kind of space, then there are quite a few mechanisms which we can find examples of in some leading teacher associations. You mentioned women in leadership, and I believe that it is a double problem. On the one hand, it is also the problem of the local context. I'll give you an example. Robert Dickey carried a study of women's leadership role in TESOL. And in one of his articles, he writes that in the American teacher associations, the percentage of women in leadership is between 75 and 100. But the interesting reason is if you look at the number of licensed teachers in America, the female population is around 80%. So that contextual feature explains why there are also more women in leadership. If we come to other places, even if the number of women is substantial among the teacher population, their number in the leadership is very limited. I believe that there are many possible ways in addressing that situation. One is to bring in mandatory norms and regulations in the teacher association bylaws, whereby it is compulsory to find women, compulsory to offer equal opportunity to all genders and races, and also bring in some kind of rotation whereby people keep changing so no vested interests develop over a long time. As I said earlier, the center itself is not a problem. How the center operates and whether it is hegemonic, that's the problem. But I think there are lots of good examples around where we can see ways of people behaving, operating democratically. Those ways have to be locally and contextually relevant. I don't think there can be one solution applicable all over the world. If I say that, I would be behaving like a center, hegemonic center.
Can I just follow up, Amol, with a comment on Facebook from one of our viewers. Wendy says, Amol, that's a very fair assessment of foreign experts. In her experience, it is the ministries of education that would invite British organizations like the British Council and other experts, external experts, to help them because they are getting disappointing results. So in essence, nothing is working, and so the foreign expert is called in to fix it. What would you say to that?
That's a common tendency, and the assumption behind that tendency is that foreign expert has all the required knowledge and understanding, not only of the domain, ELT, but also of the context in which that person is invited. And I believe that it's a very wrong assumption. I had very, very disappointing experience with I don't know if I'm being politically correct in mentioning names here, but even with some British Council trainers, I was highly disappointed because they brought such little understanding, which was less of a problem, but they brought an utter unwillingness to look around and understand from the context and adapt what they were doing. That rigidity put me off. When I mentioned the example of Maharashtra, the Minister of Education did bring in British Council and it was a joint state partnership project. But what happened after the project was over was the real decentering initiative where the Minister of Education continued with that whole force of teachers built during that project and promoted them to further roles and responsibilities. So I think that Ministry of Education did a good job in terms of decentering.
Right. Yeah, just to clarify, and I think Amol did mention the fact that not everything about the center is wrong, is bad, and that's something that we need to remember because it's very easy to polarize this conversation. The basic problem we have, and we see that a lot, is that many projects, whether they are developed by foreign experts or by local experts who themselves become centers, fail when there is no joint up understanding of the contextual realities from the perspectives of those who are actors within that area. And if you look at the literature about projects, okay, those that have worked are those that have taken on board the local understandings to develop. And it's not a secret that many foreign experts, and by foreign experts, I also mean local experts who are foreign to the classroom realities of teachers, fail to make any difference beyond the period when they are doing their project, because they had this patronizing, we are saviors of that situation, rather than trying to understand the context itself. So the whole concept of decentering is also decentering mindsets. And by decentering mindsets is the whole idea of some people thinking they're the saviors of the world, and that the rest of the world has got to act and think exactly as they think. The world doesn't operate in that manner anymore. My next question I'm taking over would be to look at the panelists at this point and to invite each of the panelists, beginning from Frederick, to share with us your project, because one of the things we want to achieve is to inspire our members and our teacher associations across Africa and the global South to think about ways in which they themselves could get together and develop more local practice that might then eventually complement the work that international organizations like the British Council and many other donor organizations and support organizations in our field are doing. So would you start by sharing with us the work that you've been doing within your association, Better Sia ELT Group in Kenya? Frederick, over to you. Unmute yourself, please. Can you unmute yourself, Frederick? Frederick, please unmute yourself. Right, while Frederick is sorting himself, okay, I think he's done so. Frederick, you're now unmuted, carry on.
Okay, thank you very much, Harry. Hi, everybody. I am Frederick from Kenya, and I'm going to talk about the Better Sia ELT Group in Kenya. First of all, let me start by the background. Better Sia is based in Kenya, and it's a small, close-knit group. It was started in 1994 with only 9 teachers, but at the moment, the membership has grown, and we are over 140 teachers within Sia County and the neighboring counties. The members mostly are drawn from high school teachers who teach in local high schools in Kenya, especially Sia County and neighbor counties. Most of them become members through their membership is dependent on the head teachers who are persuaded to pay some annual subscription for the organization to join the group, and that is approximately 21 GBP pounds, about $28 for a school to become a member. And if a school has become a member, then all the teachers within the department are also members owing to mutual understanding, and they can participate in the activities of the association. So some of the activities that we have been undertaking that can illustrate what Amola said, decentering. we are democratic, and members are allowed to elect TA leaders, and we have the key officials, that is the chairman, secretary, treasurer, and other key officials. They are elected in the office for 2 years, a maximum of 2 years term in office through secret ballot. And this is done after every 2 years in February. And there are so many things like elsewhere that we look for to elect the leaders, especially the desirable leadership qualities. And there are so many, I may not mention them now. The other activity that we undertake as a group, members decide on the annual TA program. That is the calendar for the year. It's normally decided in February, and the calendar is drawn that can make members run throughout the year. TA, also another activity, we use local expertise wherever possible. Like Harry has said, we organize 2 days workshops on teaching and assessment of English, and they are held in May each year, rotationally in various schools. Members usually will decide on the topic to discuss, need analysis survey. They'll select speakers or facilitators just from within the members. They'll pick appropriate expertise from the TA. In this way, the TA has become a local center able to provide contextually appropriate support to develop members' capacity and agency. Occasionally, speakers can be drawn from renowned university school lecturers, senior examiners, if the topics to do with the assessment, and local educational officers also are not left out. They come to grace the occasion, maybe during the opening ceremonies, and offer assistance wherever possible. This local expertise, in collaboration with the British Council, have successfully run regional workshops sponsored by Hornby. Like in Kenya, we had one organized for Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania on material design, analysis, and adaptation. Another one was on teaching of literature in the classroom and establishing teacher associations, teaching of writing, curriculum review. And one significant outcome of these workshops was the formation of associations elsewhere. Members who attended from other countries like Tanzania went back and formed a regional organization called Delta, which I'm happy to say now has transformed into a national group called Telta. I hope the Telta members are there. We met with William last year in Ethiopia, and that is quite fantastic, an achievement for a better CIA to help other TAs in other countries grow even up to national level. Another activity is that members are involved in is because Kenya teaching of English is examination oriented, so members are involved in moderating. Members are involved in setting exams to prepare students for the national exams, and these are called mocks. These mocks are administered by teachers who are members themselves in June each year and October. And the members, after they have set the exam, have been taken by the candidates or students or the learners. They meet to moderate the marking schemes before commencement of marking, with senior examiners among members guiding new teachers who have just joined with the rubrics and the mechanics of marking all the 3 papers tested in English. And one significant outcome of this kind of activity is that some members who are part of the TA, when they apply for national marking, they become accomplished examiners because they have already gotten the training within, and they become local expertise. Teaching literature is also a very important component in the syllabus. So in parallel with the mock examinations each year, our TAs also organize joint symposia for learners to discuss literature, set text, and after the learners have undertaken the discussion, they are tested by senior examiners who are members of the TA, not any other person from outside the TA. So this activity gives learners confidence and enriches their knowledge in literature and helps teachers to complete literature syllabus as required by the Ministry of Education. Other achievements that we have undertaken include the promotion of different positions. Teachers have been promoted in different positions of leadership. Another thing that we have done as teachers is literature has different set books and they are introduced after every 5 years, and there's no guidance from the ministry on how to teach them. So teachers meet and produce locally contextually appropriate teaching materials, ELT materials, the guidebooks, to help fellow teachers who are in isolated schools to know how to teach literature. And this one has worked very well. And as a group, we came up with a guidebook for Blossoms of the Savannah by H.R. Ole Poulet. We have also this year come up with a guidebook for A Doll's House by Kebrick Ibsen. And I would like to thank the Hornby Trust because it was partly funded by the Hornby Trust at the end of it, the publication. So in this way, our TA uses teachers who have developed teacher support materials before to do so again while mentoring other teachers who have not done so that they can in producing these materials that can help them in teaching. And this one further enhances TA members' capacity to use their own experience to support themselves and each other to develop more content-specific teaching and learning materials. So one significant thing that has come out from teachers coming together is teachers have also developed professionally and have been promoted to different positions of education as leaders. Integration of ICT in the learning, us coming together has also been encouraged. And as members of the group, we can use ICT materials to teach, like electronic dictionaries. We are also communicating with each other on WhatsApp, that is electronic communication. And our membership, as at now, we have around 141 participants who share information and discuss professional concerns online. Networking with other professionals and other organizations through the meeting, Harry, that we had in when I came back, I was sent by the group Better Share ELT to Uganda to attend a conference, and through there we managed to come up with a national outfit now called ELPAC, English Language Professional Associations of Kenya, and Better Share will be a stakeholder, a major chapter in that. And I would like to say here that because of that, it is just because of COVID, but we were planning to have ALZEC conference in Kenya in August. That is Africa, the third Africa Lake Zone English Language Consortium, which is an annual conference. The third one was supposed to be held in Kisumu in Kenya in August, but because of the pandemic, we have still put it on hold until the pandemic is contained. So that is one of the major achievements of teachers coming together. So in conclusion, I hope that Better Share ELT group is an example of Decentring ELT and might be of help to others wishing to support the professional development of teachers. And we are also willing as Better Share members to seek out new experience and learn from other TAs in the Global South. I think I can stop there for the time being. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Frederick. Are there any questions for Frederick, please? If you've got any specific questions about the activities that Frederick has listed, can you ask them, please, on the chat box? We would move on straight to, while we're waiting, Frederick, there would be some questions that we would pick up for you much later. Can we now pass it on to Paola?
Thank you very much.
So Paola, can you share with us your experiences with RISELT?
Thank you, Harry. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Yes, thank you. I see a smile in your face every time you pronounce my name, remembering that time when you couldn't pronounce it correctly. I'm just Paula, okay? That is absolutely fine. What I am going to do is to talk a little bit about RISELT. RISELT is not a teacher association per se, but it is, let's say, a network of teachers that have reunited with a common purpose or goal, or a common dream, if you will. RISELT is based in Chile. It started as a network among people that have a common interests. So I'm going to use my prompts here. One, because otherwise I'm going to forget. Two, because I don't want anybody to get bored or sleep in the middle of my 3-minute presentation. So I would just like to take you into, can you see this? Yes, this is RISELT. This is our website, okay? So that you would get more information about us there. What we are is a group of people who got together. We were a group of researchers, if you will, PhD students who got together at one point and realized there were a lot of things that we needed to address in our context. So one of the things that we realized was the issue of access. Why access? Because as Amol explained very well, what happened was, is this okay? Well, I've made it both sides. See how smart I am? Just to make sure you got it. So the idea the idea of access is to make sure that any research that was carried out for the purposes of informing practice, where that we reach classrooms were of easy access to people. What happens is, in Chile, as in many other countries, when you are doing research about English language teaching, most of the research that you have access to is research carried out elsewhere, usually in the UK, usually in the United States, usually in what we call Anglophone countries. But it's very difficult to access research carried out in your own context, let alone carried out in neighboring countries. So one of the things that we realized is that we needed to allow people to have access to research carried out by people that were around or neighboring countries that would share similar interests. So this is why I would like to show you this again, because this is a website where we have collected an archive of all kinds of research in English language teaching carried out in Chile, okay? So it's been a lot of hard work, but most of the research carried out in Chile is collected there, so for people to access. The other thing that we wanted to make sure we could work on is on impact. Impact, what impact we mean is that the research we were, that different research is carried out would have a clear impact in the classroom. What happens is that usually, and this happens everywhere around the world, unfortunately, most of the research carried out is for the interest of academics or is of the interest of others that are not inside the classroom. And the problem of that is that most of the information that teachers can have to improve their practice is lost. So by showing what is the research that was carrying, other Chileans were carrying out in Chile, we were able to see how relevant that could be for the classroom. And then there are some presentations that as a group we have carried out in Chile, but surprise, surprise, usually the research that is carried out is not really of immediate feedback, impact for practice. But if we had not done the work of collecting all these research projects, we wouldn't have known that there is this mismatch between the relevance of the research carried out and the impact that it's having in practice. The other thing that we wanted to do is to provide more value to the research carried out by local researchers. And not only researchers in universities, but in every different sector, and to be able to make sure that it will be valued and be recognized by locals and also by other people. Usually what happens is most of the research carried out elsewhere is valued, but not the research that is carried out inside the country for informing our local practices. And one of the main things that we realize is that most of the research that is carried out and that is considered to be valued is the research carried out by researchers. And what we wanted to do is to put teachers at the center also of the process. And because at that time, there was this massive, well now a massive project that is called the Champion Teachers Project, which has kind of traveled all over Latin America. This is a project that started in Chile in 2013, where teachers were doing classroom research and informing other teachers about their practice. We realized that that research needed to be a lot more valued. It needed to be showcased more, and needed to be given the space to be shared with other people. So in order to do that, what we did is we organized a series of conferences, the annual conference. And in those conferences, what we do is to make sure that we give an important space to research carried out by teachers, okay? So not only research carried out by academics at universities, but also put together, ideally have this bridge between research carried out by academics and research carried out by teachers, in which they could both have a conversation, have a dialogue, and help each other. So in this conference, we have managed to put together and have presentations by the well-known researchers in the country, together with researchers in classrooms, and they are able to collaborate and have dialogues, which is also a form for us of Dissenter. If we are thinking about different ways of looking at the center is sometimes considered to be academia, universities, and we would like to put the value back and the center back into schools as well. One of the things that we do as well, as we told you, is to put together this archive when teachers, different researchers in our neighboring countries and Chile could access and get information. And one of the other things that we do, we are trying to support now novice researchers put their research into paper. Sometimes there is a lot of support that you need to actually get your research out there for other people to see, in academic journals. So what we are trying now is to get supporting, mentoring help for those people, so that we also dissenter by trying to make sure not always the same people end up getting support and funding and scholarships from the government and from international institutions, but also novice researchers and people that are starting to do research as well. So again, we see decentering in a different way, not only valuing local expertise, but also valuing the work that teachers are doing in terms of providing us knowledge and information about what is happening inside the classroom in English language teaching, but also providing an opportunity for novice researchers to get out there, to be seen, to be valued, and also for local expertise to be recognized, okay? So that is what we do at RISELT. We do a lot more, but I would say that is what captures the highlight of what we do as a network. We are a non-paid membership scheme. We are just a network, and if there's any challenging issue that we would like to address is to involve teachers better in our group, because again, as Amo was talking about leadership, unfortunately, teachers, because of the amount of work that they have, they do not have the possibilities to do a lot of volunteering work. So I would say that that is a huge challenge for us to involve teachers more into the network. But that is all about RISELT. You can get more information in our website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paula. It's amazing how different the projects we are listening to can be. But the reason why we put this together was so that our members can listen to a wide range of different projects and see how within their teacher associations, because the Hornby Trust Decentring team is definitely still focusing on the role of teacher associations in all of this. So our members can see different ways in which they could be developing, helping to develop local expertise and also support teacher agency. And in a sense, I guess, from what you're saying, what they bring to the partnerships that we have with other national and international organizations, rather than just being at the receiving end of ideas and practices that often turn out to have a difficult, to not fit well into their different contexts. Can we have a question from Chanki Kuma, but I would keep that question until we've listened to all the speakers. We've also just had another question come through in the Q&A box from Fadi Dakju. So we would keep that question until we've listened to all panelists. Please don't post questions in the chat box. Post your questions in the Q&A box. And I think we've got someone on Facebook who would be bringing some of the questions straight into the Q&A box here. So I would want now to invite Shagun from Nepal.
Thanks, Harry, and the Africa TESOL team for this opportunity, by the way. I hope the internet connection would work. First of all, if internet connection, I mean, because I can see here the fluctuation and it just reminds me of instability. Regarding the project that we carried out, which connects to Dissentring is, am I audible, Harry?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, yeah. So, I would like to focus on the success story conference, which we organized in Nepal. And I would link like how success story conference has the component of dissentering patron, let's say, because it's not only the ELT teachers who got involved there, it's all the teachers teaching different subjects as well. So we organized success story conference in Nepal in 2018, which has its root in Hornby Regional School in 2013, which was organized in Nepal as well. So it was facilitated by Richard Smith and Amol Padwat. What we did in that particular Hornby Regional School in Kathmandu in 2013 was, we were asked first of all to think of or recall any successful moment that which we had in relation to teaching and learning. And we were asked to share that successful moment to the group. And later, again, in a group of three, in a different group of three. So in this way, again, we were asked further to share it with a different partner. So in this way, we were asked to recall the success story, which we had in teaching and learning, and see the strategies or some classroom strategies, it could be, or some classroom management tips, whatever. I mean, in relation to teaching and learning, we were asked that. And what I found is sharing success story or celebrating one's own success can be very much powerful approach for teacher development. So what I did personally as well is I took this approach further and I adopted it in teacher development activities. It went well. As it went well, we later organized a conference, a special conference session where again we asked teachers to bring their success stories and share it. So as we found it really effective. What we did in 2018 was we thought like, okay, how about taking it further and organizing it as a big conference? We thought that way. Then we named it First Success Story Conference of Teachers in Nepal. Then we organized a conference where we invited teachers to share their success stories in relation to classroom teaching and learning. What they did is they shared what exactly went well in their classroom, what different steps that did they follow in relation to that particular success story, and what was the students' response, what was the learners' response. They shared it. So here the point is like teachers valued their own teachers first of all recognized their own expertise, valued their own expertise, and they shared. Now here teachers are the mentors. Teachers are the mentors to let's say guide or to guide the other teachers, let's say, because they are sharing their own context sensitive strategies to their own local teachers. So it's like more teachers are learning from each other. So they are valuing their own expertise, they are recognizing their own expertise, and they are sharing their own expertise with each other. So it's more a bottom-up approach, or let's say enhancement approach, which Richard Smith calls it as well. So this is one. And let's say how again, the next standpoint here is, actually we didn't take much help from teacher association. In an institution where I was working, we collaborated with the colleagues, we proposed it to the admin, and we organized this conference where more than 150 teachers attended, and more than 20 presentations were there, again from teachers only. See, teachers came up with their, so many teachers were first time speakers. They didn't know, like they didn't have any kind of experience of attending the conference or presenting as well. But they came up with their own stories, they shared there, and they found they could be presenters. So it's not only experts, it's the teachers who could do. So they realized this potential. And interestingly, the other aspect which I need to add here is teachers also had the leadership role here, as they joined different kind of subcommittees, for example, publication subcommittee, or let's say IT support subcommittee, or rapporteur management committee, and so on. So the teachers who never had experience of organizing conference as well, they happen to be the organizers in the conference, and they had the leadership role. They enjoyed it. So see, dissentering is taking place in different ways here, like getting leadership role again, and then recognizing their own expertise and valuing them. And then again, it's more because now the thing is, we place in this success story conference approach, we place teachers and teachers' experiences at the center. So now, as the first success story conference went really successful, again, as I came to Dublin, like even I later, they organized the second success story conference as well in 2019. Now, it's going on, and this year I'm not sure because of pandemic as well, pandemic crisis situation as well. I don't know whether they would organize or not. So, I mean, the kind of the small approach which went further in a teacher training approach, and further as a special session in the conference, and it became larger in a success story conference. What I believe is it can fit in many contexts, no doubt, but the context that's here, similar situation like of Nepal, definitely teachers enjoy to share their own stories, because I was so much happy when I was asked to share my story in that particular forum in the Hornby Regional School. So sharing, everyone loves to share success stories, and everyone loves to learn from each other. If we organize such conferences, such teacher development program, let's say in any other context, probably it can also help to dissenter the Dissenter ELT, let's say English language teaching. Thank you, Harry. I guess you're
yeah, thank you very much, Sagun. I would very quickly run through some of the questions. And the first one, which I have here from Chanki Kuma, says, how are teacher associations supporting teachers to adjust in the new normal after the COVID pandemic? And that he would like to hear from all panelists about their initiative. Before you respond, just a very quick word to say that Africa TESOL ran a series of webinars. I think there were 4 or 5 webinars in which different teacher associations across Africa shared their experiences and their activities during the pandemic period. So if you go on on YouTube and enter Africa TESOL, you would find answers to your question from different teacher associations in Africa. So I would rather pass this on then to Paula and then to Sagun.
Okay. If the question has to do with the current COVID situation, right?
Yes.
Yes. Because our network, it is based on research, there have been a number of questions being asked as to whether we would do any kind of, I don't know, webinar or workshop on methodology. We wouldn't do that because it would change the focus of our network. However, as as our focus is research, and because we feel that teachers are at this point so overworked, we try to manage online teaching at home and their working lives. It is our perspective that maybe teachers need to back off a little bit at this point. We realize that the pandemic at this moment offers a lot of opportunities for teachers to get a lot of information from teachers. However, we feel that there is a lot of surveys out there of trying to get information from teachers in a very difficult time and a very stressful time, which is something that we think may be a little bit of academic opportunities to try to gather information. However, we feel as researchers that maybe we need to back off a little bit at this time and allow teachers to manage the contingency at this moment. So what we are doing as an association is to continue to provide information about the findings of research, about keeping our archive updated. But we think that teachers are so overworked right now that maybe they need a little bit of time to manage their online teaching situation. At least that's what is happening in Chile.
Right, thank you. A question for, oh no, sorry, we haven't heard from Shagun.
Sorry, I missed your question. Could you please repeat, Harry?
The question was what your local TA is doing to support teachers during this time of the pandemic.
Oh yeah, in Nepal, our Nepal English Language Teachers Association is doing quite a lot. And since it has got so many chapters across the region, different chapters have, this is what exactly Dissentering again, different chapters have initiated different kind of webinars again, basically for teacher development, and they have collaborated globally as well. Sometimes they request their own local colleagues as well, and then they collaborate and they are organizing different webinars again. And this has really helped teachers to get familiar with some new tools, again promote their own digital literacy or digital competencies. In the meantime, focusing their own content or own pedagogy as well. So it has really helped. Otherwise, in Nepal right now, let's say Nepal government, our government, has not been able to do that kind of event due to the own resources as well. But it's local teachers association who have been able to with their own ideas, fresh ideas, and then organize different webinars or let's say the conferences as well, and then let's say bring all the colleagues together to learn, being in a wider community of practitioners. This is what I have seen, and that can be done in other countries as well, because we have been successful in that regard. NILTA is successful in that regard.
Great. We've got tons of questions coming through and also from Facebook. So our next question goes to Frederick and is from Richard Cayley. How, as a teacher association leader, did you know that teaching literature was a problem for your teachers in Kenya?
Hello, can you hear me, Harry?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I think after every 5 years, I think the government introduces new books. They bring about 3 set books, and the teachers are not prepared. They are just given the books and they're given to go and teach. So we found out that this was a problem through our TA, because in our first meeting when we are sharing ideas, teachers came with various problems through the brainstorming session, and this one significantly became an idea that they cannot teach these new books. And we had to visit schools, and then we came together and we found out that the solution was to sit down as a TA and come up with an ELT material that can assist them writing a guidebook. So the teachers reported to us in our TA organization as leaders, and we were also sharing this online through the WhatsApp group.
So these were, if I understand you, these were identified from amongst the teachers themselves, rather than someone in the ministry thinking up what might not be right according to from their perspective, and inviting an expert who fits their perspective of things. Am I right?
Exactly, what you are saying is right. In fact, I forgot to say that this association started from bottom up. It was just something idea that teachers hatched when we attended a British Council workshop. And then we said we have so many challenges in our teaching context, and we decided to come up as a group and form an association. And we have gotten very little help from the ministry. It's normally bottom-up approach. The ministry, as I said, they only come to grace the occasion, maybe opening ceremony, and we are also call upon them when you want to register. And a decision like now, we are trying to register a national outfit. But all ideas come from teachers, and teachers, apart from the curriculum, you are given the syllabus, minister decided on the curriculum, and you are there, you are given to teach, and quite a number of teachers left college long time ago, and some are new who have come in, they don't know what to do, and that's how the TA now comes in to assist them, and it's a bottom-up approach.
All right. I just want to mention to our listeners, our participants, that we have permission from Africa TESOL to carry on till about 6:30, but we might end before that. Quick question back to you, Frederick, and this from Alan Mack and also Helen, who's written from Ireland. Now, Alan says literature is important and useful. So what regional or local writers are being promoted in your regions? And I think that would start with you, Frederick. But also Helen goes on to say she wonders if Dissentering should also include context-specific materials for learners, because she developed course books for schools, for school kids who dropped out based on gender issues experienced by the kids in Rwanda. So do you think, what are the local materials? What is your perspective about Dissentering in relation to local materials themselves?
Yes,
and literature?
Yeah, and the literature, I think, as I said earlier, we have a course book in literature, which is locally, the author, The Blossom of the Savannah. The author is a Kenyan, Ole Kulet is a Maasai, and you know Maasai is a community in Kenya. So I think that one encouraged the local publishers. And we have also been using local publishers like the late Chinua, of course, Ngugi wa Thiong'o. So after every 5 years, we introduce others. And out of that, one book must be from the African context, another one from other parts of the country. So there must be one play and a novel. So like this time, the play is from outside Africa, but the novel is from inside Africa, right from Kenya, which has replaced the other one that also was from a local author. And I think for developing locally appropriate materials to help with literature, that's what we have come up as a group, as teachers who have had experience to help the others. Because the book is there, you are given, and you cannot interpret it. So the teachers will interpret it in terms of plot, characterization, theme, so to help the learners understand the books that have been produced by the government. And we welcome the idea from Rwanda.
Yeah. Well, having worked as a policymaker in the ministry myself for about 7 years, 6, 7, 8 years, and also part of a teacher association, I know in the 90s, with the wind of change that went to maybe in North Africa, but also across sub-Saharan Africa, a lot happened in terms of the reviewing curriculum. So in my generation, for example, we studied European history and British history, but then the generation after us is looking back at African and Cameroon history, for example, and that too has kind of been the case with language education. So in Cameroon, for example, as far as I can remember, course books are all authored by Cameroonian author. There is no course book for the last maybe 15, 20 years in Cameroon that was authored by someone elsewhere, although sometimes we do have books written by local publishers, local authors, and published by British, particularly British publishers, but there's more of a partnership in that area. A question that would go to Paula, you said a lot about the relevance of research conducted by local teachers and experts. What are some activities of your association or your team that encourage teachers to actually involve in research?
Well, there is, as I mentioned before, there is this initiative in Chile that supports teachers to do research. It's a big initiative which supports teachers all over the country working in the state school system mainly. So we wouldn't want to do more mentoring initiatives for teachers to do research, because otherwise we would saturate teachers with more of those, because that initiative is niche, it's for the whole country. But what we do, we provide opportunities for that research that teachers do to have a spotlight, to be able for them to share that in a conference. So every time we organize our conference, those teachers have a special place in the conference when they present their classroom-based research. They are not given, they do not even need to go through a selection process. There's a special place for them at the conference. And the reason that we do that is because we do think that they have important knowledge and information to provide to the conference. So those are the moments that we give to them to shine in a way, and we introduce them at the opening of the conference to make sure that people do see them and do value the work that they do in the classroom. And I would say that it has been assessed positively.
Yeah. And a question from Erica Kembe for you, Paula. What are the prospects that some of the teachers will continue, or the same teachers will continue following the project that you described for the next couple of 5 years, maybe, talking about sustainability?
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because those are one of the things that we have beginning to wonder. Usually the teachers that gain into this process have reported feeling a different way of approaching their work. So they become more inquiry-based, they become more inquisitive, they become more analytical about their work. So it does have a huge impact on the way they approach the work. Now, whether they do research, again, some of them have reported that they do. But it's important to consider the fact that a lot of the teacher research initiatives at the moment are being supported by the British Council, which is, we have a huge homework, I would say a challenge as a country, to make sure we support them in different ways so that we don't always have to depend on external support. And I would say those are the things that we are reflecting on and thinking about and discussing at the moment, how to continue that support.
Right. A question that has come through from Facebook from Adi, our friend from Cote d'Ivoire, and I think I would like to invite Amol to respond to this, if you can, Amol. And his question, because the whole decentering theme, or decentering ELT theme, has to do with valuing the work of teachers as well, their expertise, their contribution. And Adi would like to know how teachers would get to value their own work. How can we break that curse, I'm putting that word in quotes, of teachers often seeing themselves as ordinary teachers and relying on outsiders to their classrooms for solutions to their own problems?
I think this is a fairly common phenomenon, and we faced this particularly when in INET we started the Teacher Research Initiative, where it was difficult to overcome the preliminary resistance of teachers who were not willing to believe that they could research and they could investigate and they could write reports and that would have some value. And I think this is one of the sad fallouts of the very long expert culture that ELT has been suffering from. It also partly relates to the difference, the distinction of roles between the so-called university academics who should do research in laboratories and the poor teachers who should be only implementing what others find them as ready-made solutions. Now, when teachers begin to do that, one of the earliest discovery of the value of the research is in the process itself. And what we found as a common story for teacher after teacher is when they started investigating classrooms, talking to their students, talking to their colleagues, and getting such fantastic feedback and such good rapport with each other that itself defined the value of their research for themselves. So what I would say in short is, for teachers to value their own work is first to begin working, and secondly, not to compare their work against, I would say in quotation, the standard benchmarks of quality or research or norms. And if we stop comparing ourselves with the academic or other norms or so-called standard benchmarks, then I think we will quickly realize that what we do has some value, at least locally. And when we start sharing it, we realize that there is a value in wider community as well.
Harry, shall I add something?
Yes, yes, please.
What exactly happened when we organized the success story conference is, like, I'm going to address and link here. I feel like, we don't provide ample space for teachers to share their work, whether one agrees or not. What I've seen is, like, if we create some space that way, then they come up with they come up with their own context sensitive strategies or context sensitive practices, and that inform others, and they feel like, oh, their own expertise work really well. Again, they can be, those strategies might be the reorganization of whatever they have learned as well, could be, or sometimes they might come up with a very new strategies as well. Once they share, then other teachers can realize, oh, even I have done the same kind of thing even in my reality as well. So then that validates too. So I think my point here is we have to create some kind of platform for the teachers to share. It's not only like experts come and share, because we still have a perception like, okay, experts would, even in the conference, what we did even in that conference is we had keynote speaker as well. We got the panels as well, because to make it look like a conference, we had to do that. We might call it like, giving legitimacy to the conference, but valuing teachers' expertise, like, teachers themselves have got very much context sensitive strategies, which can be practically applied in some other context, who will be in some other context who share the similar kind of context as well. If we make them some platform available, then probably that would also help them. That's my point. And in that case, again, this, we can call it either success story conference or success story kind of teacher development activity, anything. We can give any kind of name, but if we create the platform to make them share their own expertise or values, then others can recognize their own values as we're looking at someone as a colleague who is sharing. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. We've also had another question from Facebook from Prem Piak in Nepal. Hello, Prem. And it says, is the notion of teacher association itself not a centric notion in terms of power relations, knowledge production, and representation of people and epistemologies? Any reaction to that? I think I think Maria asked the question about the centers within teacher associations at the beginning, and the mechanisms put in place to enable not just women but other members in the peripheries to contribute. So in a sense, that I think Amol touched on that, but Amol, would you want to come back to that, or is there anyone of the panelists who would want to come back to that question?
Maybe I will have a quick comment and others may join. I would say, Prem, why teacher associations only? Anything can be a location of a center. There are power relations everywhere. So if we say that teacher association, the notion of teacher association is by default a centering notion, then we are probably, in my view, we are thinking in a wrong way by assuming that certain kinds of organizations are centering and certain others are not. It's the nature, the way of functioning, the relationships maintained, the procedural and operational norms, all these things which make something centering or not so centering. So teacher associations, I won't agree with you in that kind of generalization and say that a teacher association can be not so centering at all. And I would also add that it's rare for a teacher association to be completely centered or completely decentered throughout its history. even in IITFL, we have seen patches when IITFL was strongly centered, and then there were patches when there were strong currents of decentering. So centers exist in terms of their functionality operations. That's what I would say. Over to you, Harry.
Any other comment?
Yes, can I add something, Frederick? Frederick, can I add something, Harry?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this about centering, I think in teacher associations, we can come up with a constitution, like you've come up with ours, either through consensus or a written one. And this one can help to guide how to share the responsibilities, especially who takes this post and the terms of office. And there's something quickly I want to add that was asked about how the teachers, when they come as teachers in a group like in the TA, how do they feel that their work is valued? And I want just a quick one. When we came up with the guidebook, The Blossoms of the Savannah, and we taught it and gave teachers and taught it, the performance in exam in literature at the beginning of this year was quite wonderful. There was a marked improvement, and teachers were happy that their work was valued because what material they produced helped the performance of the learners to improve. Thank you.
Sorry, Harry, can I just add something? Sometimes I just worry about the rhetoric behind this whole notion of putting teachers back at the center, and sometimes I get concerned whether we are not falling into the same trap. The fact that I don't see teacher associations at the center, the fact that they are called teacher associations, I am quite happy with that. I just get worried when sometimes the teacher associations are only led and formed and whatever just by university professors, which is probably what we are very concerned about in our own network.
Ministry officials.
Exactly, and which we are very concerned in our own network. We would like to involve teachers as much as possible because it's interesting, but it's a teacher association. But then when you ask them, what do you do? They tell you, I'm a university professor. So then you're not a teacher anymore. So all those things sometimes I worry about. Just recently, I just read there is a book that is something about expertise, building expertise from experience. And there is this interesting book with all these wonderful stories, people from different backgrounds. But I really didn't see any school teacher represented in that book. So I'm wondering when we are going to actually move from the rhetoric and move teachers away from the periphery into the center. If the center is a publication that is going to be available and readily available for everybody in an international sphere, then maybe we need to publish more classroom teachers' stories and stop thinking of ourselves as the only teachers, when actually, if you think about it in terms of proportion, most of classroom teaching happening now, it's happening in schools. And they are the center to me, but for some reason, they are not in these kind of discussions. So I think we need to move past the rhetoric and actually do involve teachers in a more widely sphere.
Yeah, maybe just to add, Paula, we need to also recognize that many university academics are also teachers, and by virtue of their having been teachers or still being teachers, they also do have an important contribution to teacher associations, and especially the responsibility sometimes is on them to support teachers in that process of building local expertise. Now, we do have a number of questions that have come. We have just 10 more minutes. Questions about the pandemic. Please, we can't answer questions about how teachers are dealing or teacher associations are dealing about the pandemic here, because we've pointed you to our YouTube channel to find that out. We want to focus on the idea of decentering and how that might work out for our teacher associations. I'm just looking at a question that came from Gladys Focho from Cameroon, who asked, how do you decenter at the international level to include developing countries? Now, I'm not too sure, but my understanding is that has to do with international associations like TESOL, like IITFL, like Africa TESOL. and they are not represented in this panel. So we want to focus more on what our local teacher associations can do in developing countries. And that's why Africa TESOL is running this webinar series, so that they do not depend entirely on international level organizations. I don't think that our independence can be sought, or our independence can be achieved by depending on someone to do that for us. So it's important that we start building that from the bottom up, and also showcasing what we have to offer, because the more our teachers, our local associations have something to offer, the more their voices are on the spot, in the spotlight, the more they would be heard, and the more we can showcase that contribution in the ELT world and in international organizations. Now, Helen Callanan said, thank you everyone, really interesting, just on materials incorporating real country issues specific to children's realities in country, adapted to curricular requirements, not just imported ELT materials written by in-country writers. I have seen the materials written by many are just ELT written by those in-country. This would make teachers teaching relevant locally. Well, that's more like a suggestion. Thank you very much, Helen. I'm not too sure we've got many questions here, so that are particularly related to the theme of decentering. But there was one that came in very early from Latif, asking Frederick to talk about the challenges. And I think this is a question for everyone on the panel, because we've all listened to the great side, the positive sides of your projects, but it's not been a bed of roses. So what are some of the challenges that you've encountered, and how have you dealt with them? Can we start with Frederick? Frederick, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think one of the challenges is, on membership. Teachers are skeptical when they want to join the teacher association, but in a way, we motivate them by organizing workshops, sharing ideas together, and this, in a way, normally they see the need of working together in a teacher association. And then one thing that challenges that we have is the membership fee. I think most teachers may not like to join an association and they pay out of their pockets. So that is why we have solved this problem by looking for the head teachers to help subscribe for these teachers so that they subscribe as a school. And this, in a way, has made many members to join the TA, because if you say that it's individual membership, members join on their own, it is not possible. Some will join and will shy away. And again, another thing is a challenge that we have is about, maybe if there's a task, is about meeting deadlines. You may set a deadline that we want to finish this activity by this time. So most teachers may not meet the deadline, but the leaders, in quotes, the leaders who are chosen, you'll see how to work with your members to ensure that they meet their deadlines. So I think it's just a matter of negotiation and coming together and agreeing on some principles and ground rules to make the TA work. Otherwise, challenges are there. You cannot say they are not there. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comment? The last question that would, okay, Shagun, go on.
I mean, the challenge that NELTA is currently facing as well is, reaching out to all the members. Sometimes there's expectation, like once they become members and there's certain expectation from those members, like they would get something, they would gain something, could be teacher training package or could be anything at all. So reaching out to all the members can be a big challenge, and it's always difficult to plan very much, to have a very much solid plan. Then the only possibility is, again, organizing different events that can reach out to those people as well. Possibly, like, organizing webinars again, or to reach out to certain people who couldn't travel to certain location. That could be one. So that's the challenge that NELTA is facing is, certain number of members are definitely benefited, but not all. So this is a challenge that we are facing.
Right, okay, right. We've got just 4 more minutes. Maybe that's time to wrap up, not until I've had this question that Eric Akembe raised. He says there seems to be a lot of simplification of the sociocultural implications in the process of decentering in contexts where structures define relationships. Can you shed more light on this? Very quickly, if I can say anything, the reason why we are listening to different examples, local examples, is just so that people can see how different teacher associations are managing the sociocultural relationships and the structures within their context. In case any of this resonates with us, there is really no clear-cut way in which we can say all decentering happens in a particular way. It would happen in different ways, and the process would be different in different contexts, and that would be determined by the structures in place. And our role as Africa TESOL in this webinar series is to showcase many examples of decentering initiatives, local initiatives, in the hope that some of this might resonate with your context, with the structures that define relationships within your context, and that you might, or that you might be inspired by them to then start reflecting on ways in which you could engage in the decentering process, bearing in mind the specific realities of your context. So maybe we would, unless there is another comment to that, is there another comment? Any other comment? I would hand over then to Mary.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary, and thank you very much all the panelists for attending this webinar, and to all the participants also. We just want to say that this session is recorded and you can access it through our Facebook and YouTube channels. I know you may have many questions, but we invite you to continue the discussions on those platforms. And we are also looking forward to meeting you next Tuesday for the 3rd webinar, which will be looking at recent and current Hornby projects, which illustrate the notion of decentering ELT in different ways. Do have a great week and see you again next week, same time.
Bye.
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 Bye.